The Nkuhuma pride roamed the vast expanse of Sabi Sands, a formidable group of lionesses led by experienced males. Among them were two young males, one born into the Nkuhuma pride and the other from the Styx pride. From an early age, they lived under the protection of their pride's dominant males, learning the ways of the wild. They watched as the leaders patrolled their territory, defended their lionesses, and ensured the survival of the pride. As cubs, their days were filled with play, strengthening their muscles and sharpening their instincts. Their mothers provided food, and the dominant males secured their land. The balance was perfect, and the young males grew into strong adolescents. But change was inevitable. The pride's dominant males began to show signs of age, their roars less commanding, their presence no longer as feared. Other males, sensing weakness, patrolled the borders, waiting for an opportunity to strike. The young males watched as the power their fathers once wielded slowly faded. Then came the moment they had always known would arrive. The dominant males were challenged, and after a fierce battle they were defeated. The pride was taken over by a new coalition. The young males were no longer welcome. Their presence was a threat, and if they stayed, they would be killed. Instinct drove them forward. They left the only home they had ever known, stepping into a world filled with danger, uncertainty, and the promise of something greater. The young Nkuhuma males wandered into the unknown, their bond the only thing keeping them strong. No longer protected by their pride, they faced the harsh reality of nomadic life. Hunting was no longer a skill learned through observation, it was a necessity for survival. Their first attempts were clumsy, and hunger gnawed at their bellies. They traveled through unclaimed land, avoiding the borders of powerful coalitions. They heard the distant roars of dominant males, warning them to stay away. Every step was filled with danger. Hyenas followed them, sensing weakness, waiting for a moment to strike. Despite the hardship, they grew stronger. Each failed hunt became a lesson. Each encounter with danger sharpened their instincts. They learned to move silently, to track prey without being seen, to fight as one. Then an opportunity presented itself. A vast territory, lightly defended. A pride with no strong males. A chance to reclaim the power they had lost. The young males stood at the edge of the land, their eyes scanning the horizon. They knew the risk, but they also knew the reward. They had survived the trials of exile. Now, they were ready to fight for their place in the wild. Hello guys, if you like our stories and haven't subscribed yet, support our work and subscribe to the channel to help us. The vast land before them was tempting, but hesitation crept into their minds. They had seen what happened to males who challenged. Too soon, bodies left torn and broken, defeated by stronger coalitions. The scent of other lions still lingered in the area. It was possible that the pride they had their eyes on was not as unguarded as it seemed. Doubt clouded their instincts. They had barely survived as nomads. Was it too soon to fight for territory? What if they failed? What if stronger males returned and tore them apart before they even had a chance to establish themselves? The hunger that had driven them forward was now matched by fear. For days they followed the pride from a distance, watching, waiting, assessing their chances. Their instincts told them to move, to take the land before others claimed it. But experience told them to be cautious. The wild did not forgive mistakes. One wrong move, and they would lose everything. Then, the sound of a lone roar shattered the silence. A male lion alone. He was past his prime, his once magnificent mane faded with age. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The fear still lingered, but survival demanded action. There was no more room for hesitation. This young Nkuhuma males had no teacher other than the wild itself. They had learned from the pride's dominant males before exile, watching their every move, studying their patrols, their fights, their control over the land. But the wilderness had become their true mentor. It had hardened them, forced them to become hunters, fighters, and survivors. Now, as they prepared for their first battle, They drew upon everything they had learned. They remembered how coalitions worked together, how numbers were an advantage if used correctly. They had seen old lions lose their land before, had watched them become weaker, alone, vulnerable. The lone male in the distance was their first real test. He was not a mere rival, he was a reflection of what could happen to them if they failed. If they did not claim territory now, they could wander until they too became weak and forgotten. Their decision was made. They were no longer cubs, no longer outcasts. They were warriors, and this was their first battle for dominance. The two Nkuhuma males moved swiftly, their muscles tensed with anticipation. They circled the lone male, testing his reaction, watching his every move. He was older, but still dangerous. A single mistake could cost them everything. The older lion roared in defiance, unwilling to surrender without a fight. He lunged at them, claws flashing, teeth bared, but he was outnumbered. The young males attacked with precision, their bond giving them the advantage. They worked together, flanking him, cutting off his escape. The fight was brutal. The older lion landed blows, his experience showing in every movement, but he was fighting against time, against the strength of youth. The battle did not last long. With one final lunge, the young males forced him to the ground. Defeated, the old lion let out a final growl before turning away, vanishing into the wilderness. They had done it. The land was theirs. They stood victorious, their roars echoing. Into the night, a declaration of their arrival. They were no longer nomads. They had crossed the threshold into power. But power came with a price. Their true test was only beginning. With their first victory came new responsibilities. The pride they had claimed was wary of them. The lionesses had lived under a different rule, and their loyalty was not yet earned. The Nkuhuma males had won the land, but now they had to prove they could keep it. They patrolled their new territory relentlessly, marking their presence, ensuring that no other males dared challenge them. The lionesses watched from a distance, uncertain but observant. Their instincts told them to submit to the strongest, but trust had to be built. Days turned into weeks, and the brothers continued to solidify their reign. Then, their first real challenge came. A pair of nomadic males, strong and aggressive, entered their territory. The scent of intruders sent a clear message. This land was still being tested. The Nkuhuma males did not hesitate. They met the challengers head-on, roaring warnings that echoed across the plains. The fight was inevitable. Dust rose as claws slashed and teeth sank into flesh. The battle was fierce, but the brothers fought as one, their bond unshakable. The intruders, realizing they were outmatched, fled before the final blow could be delivered. The victory reinforced their dominance. The lionesses took notice. Slowly, they accepted the new rulers, and soon after, the first cubs were born under the Nkuhuma reign. But the wild was never at peace. Their enemies were growing stronger, watching from the shadows. The balance of power was always shifting, and a greater threat was looming on the horizon. The Nkuhuma males had established themselves as rulers, but they knew that power was fleeting. Every roar in the distance reminded them that their reign could be challenged at any moment. They had claimed land, secured lionesses, and sired cubs, but dominance in the wild was never permanent. Signs of trouble began to surface. A group of powerful males, a coalition much stronger than the previous challengers, had been spotted near their borders. Their scent markings grew fresher, their roars louder. The Nkuhuma brothers knew what was coming. The wilderness was testing them once again. The pride sensed the tension. The lionesses became more alert. The cubs were kept closer. The air was thick with unease. The brothers patrolled constantly, their bodies covered in scars from previous battles. They had fought before, but this time the threat was greater. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the roars of the invaders came closer than ever before. The challenge had been issued. The brothers had a choice: stay and fight for everything they had built, or abandon their territory and live as nomads once more. There was no time to hesitate. The invaders were coming. The battle for survival was about to begin. The night erupted with the sounds of war. The invading coalition, 3 strong and battle-hardened males, charged into the heart of the Nkuhuma territory. Their roars shattered the silence, a warning that the land was no longer safe. The Nkuhuma brothers met them head-on, knowing that retreat was not an option. Dust and blood filled the air as the lions clashed in a brutal fight for dominance. The ground trembled beneath them as massive bodies collided. Claws tore through flesh, and fangs locked onto throats. One of the Nkuhuma males fought with unmatched fury, defending not just his brother but the future of his pride. But the numbers were against them. One of the invaders lunged, sinking his teeth into his hind leg, dragging him down. His brother fought desperately to free him, but the second intruder struck, slashing deep into his shoulder. The battle raged on, but the tide had turned. The brothers, though fierce, were outnumbered and slowly overwhelmed. The invading males had youth and strength on their side. The older of the Nkuhuma brothers let out a final defiant roar before he fell. His brother, wounded and outmatched, knew there was no victory here. His only option was to flee. He turned, running into the night, leaving behind the land they had fought so hard to claim. The new kings roared in triumph, their victory cemented in blood. The Nkuhuma reign had fallen. Defeated but still breathing, the last surviving Nkuhuma male ran until the scent of his former land faded into the night. His body ached from wounds both fresh and old, his pride shattered, his purpose uncertain. He had lost everything, their territory, their lionesses, and the brother who had fought beside him. But even in loss, something remained. The cubs sired under their reign still lived, hidden among the lionesses who had once accepted them as rulers. Some would survive, carrying the bloodline of the Nkuhuma Coalition into the next generation. Their legacy had not been completely erased. He lingered at the edges of familiar lands, watching from a distance. He could not return. He would be killed if the new rulers caught him. But he was still alive, and in the wild, survival meant opportunity. His days as a king were over, but the wilderness was vast and new paths lay ahead. He turned away from his lost home, vanishing into the unknown. The lone Nkuhuma male wandered once more, a ghost of his former self. His journey as a nomad had begun again, but this time he was not a young lion learning the ways of survival. He was a warrior who had tasted both power and defeat. With no territory to call his own, he scavenged what he could, avoiding stronger coalitions. He drank from shallow waterholes in lands unclaimed by lions, fed on scraps left behind by hyenas, and moved under the cover of night. Every roar in the distance was a reminder of what he had lost. But the wild had not yet taken him. He was still strong, still capable. He had ruled before, and in his heart, he knew he could rule again. All he needed was the right opportunity. His story was not over. Somewhere, beyond the reaches of his former kingdom, another pride existed without protectors, another chance to reclaim his place in the cycle of dominance. He did not stop moving. He would not stop fighting. Not yet. The lone Nkuhuma male continued his journey, but time was no longer on his side. The scars of his past battles slowed him, and the weight of exile bore heavily on his once powerful frame. He had survived challenges that had claimed others, but the wild was relentless. Days turned into weeks, and food became harder to find. Without a coalition, hunting was difficult, and scavenging from others was dangerous. He lingered near the outskirts of known territories, avoiding the patrols of stronger coalitions. He was not yet ready to challenge for power, but he was also unwilling to disappear into obscurity. One evening, he stumbled upon the scent of lionesses, unprotected, their pride without strong males. It was a chance, maybe his last, to reclaim some of what he had lost. But he was no longer the same lion who had once ruled alongside his brother. He was alone, and in the wild, no king ruled alone for long. The moment of decision had arrived. Fight for dominance once more, or fade away into the wilderness. The story of the Nkuhuma Coalition did not end with their fall. Though their rule was brief, their presence left a mark on the land. The cubs they sired lived on, some growing into strong lions who would one day carve their own place in the wild. The surviving Nkuhuma male remained a shadow in the wilderness, a reminder of how quickly power could shift. Perhaps he would find a new opportunity, a new pride, a chance to rebuild. or perhaps his time had passed, his roar soon to be silenced by the unyielding laws of the wild. But his name and that of his fallen brother would not be forgotten. The land remembered those who fought for it. The echoes of their roars would remain in the whispers of the savannah, long after their paw prints faded from the earth.